Understanding female psychology gives a man a major advantage in relationships, dating, and attraction. Women, like men, have emotional patterns, desires, and vulnerabilities that shape the way they think and behave. Recognizing these patterns isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness. Knowing what naturally influences a woman allows a man to navigate interactions with confidence, communicate effectively, and create genuine connection. Certain weaknesses or tendencies exist across female psychology that, when understood, help a man lead with composure, clarity, and emotional intelligence. Every woman has triggers, desires, and emotional sensitivities. Some are related to ego, others to insecurity, and some to natural instincts. Understanding these can help a man recognize how she responds in relationships, what makes her feel valued, and where she might overreact or seek reassurance. These weaknesses aren't flaws. They're part of the human emotional design, and they offer insight into what motivates her thoughts, feelings, and actions. By being aware, you can avoid unnecessary conflict, strengthen attraction, and establish a deeper connection while maintaining your own boundaries. In this video, we'll break down the top 7 female weaknesses every man must know. Each one will reveal how women naturally react in certain situations, what triggers their emotions, and how understanding these tendencies can help a man communicate effectively and maintain influence. Knowing these weaknesses is about seeing the world from her perspective, predicting behavior, and responding with awareness. By the end, you'll have a clearer understanding of female psychology, giving you an edge in relationships, dating, and personal interactions. 1. Emotional validation. One of the most universal female tendencies is the need for emotional validation. Women are highly attuned to feelings, both their own and others, and they naturally seek acknowledgement for what they feel. When a woman experiences strong emotions, whether it's frustration, sadness, or excitement, she instinctively looks for recognition. She wants someone to understand, affirm, and mirror her emotions. This isn't about manipulation, it's about connection. When a man fails to provide validation, she often feels unheard or dismissed, which can escalate emotional tension. Emotional validation is powerful because it creates trust and intimacy. When a woman feels that her emotions matter, she opens up more, shares more, and invests emotionally. Conversely, when a man ignores or minimizes her feelings, it can trigger insecurity or frustration. Even if the issue seems trivial, the emotional weight she places on the moment is real to her. Understanding this allows a man to navigate conversations without unnecessary conflict, ensuring she feels valued while maintaining his composure. The key weakness here isn't weakness in a negative sense, it's a natural reliance on emotional reciprocity. Women process emotions differently than men, often seeking verbal affirmation, empathy, or supportive gestures. A man who recognizes this can respond effectively without overreacting or giving excessive attention. Simple acknowledgement, thoughtful listening, and occasional reassurance go a long way in maintaining harmony and attraction. Another aspect of emotional validation is that it can influence decision-making. Women who feel understood and emotionally supported are more likely to respond positively to suggestions, compromises, or invitations. When you provide validation, you reduce friction, build rapport, and strengthen connection. When you withhold it, even unintentionally, it can create tension or distance. Men often underestimate the impact of emotional acknowledgement. Women don't necessarily want solutions. They want recognition. By simply listening, empathizing, or responding thoughtfully, a man can diffuse emotional escalation and create stronger bonds. Failing to recognize this tendency can make interactions unnecessarily strained. Emotional validation also links directly to attraction. A woman feels drawn to men who can stay calm, acknowledge her feelings, and respond without defensiveness. It demonstrates emotional intelligence, patience, and reliability. Men who grasp this principle have a significant advantage because they can provide stability, emotional presence, and reassurance without being overly reactive. Understanding that women naturally seek emotional validation allows a man to navigate interactions with clarity. He can choose when to engage, how to respond, and when to maintain composure. Recognizing this as a core psychological tendency equips him with insight into why she reacts emotionally and how to handle it effectively. Emotional validation is one of the most consistent female tendencies, and knowing how to respond appropriately positions a man as composed, confident, and attractive in her eyes. 2. Attention and reassurance. Another consistent female tendency is the need for attention and reassurance. Women thrive on feeling noticed, appreciated, and valued in relationships. This isn't about dependency. It's a natural psychological response to connection and emotional security. When a woman senses that a man is genuinely attentive, she feels safe, validated, and connected. Conversely, a lack of attention can trigger insecurity, doubt, or overthinking. Attention and reassurance act as emotional fuel, reinforcing her sense of importance and her connection to you. Women are wired to notice energy and effort. Small gestures, words, or actions carry significant meaning. A man who remembers details, compliments thoughtfully, or consistently shows interest reinforces her emotional security. Even simple check-ins, calls, or messages can have a powerful impact. Conversely, inconsistent attention creates uncertainty, which can trigger emotional reactions like testing, curiosity, or attempts to regain your focus. Understanding this tendency allows a man to provide the right balance of engagement without appearing desperate or controlling. Reassurance goes beyond simple praise. Women often need confirmation that they matter, that their emotions are acknowledged, and that the connection is valued. This can manifest as verbal acknowledgement, supportive gestures, or consistent presence. When she feels reassured, she relaxes emotionally, becomes more open, and invests more in the relationship. When she doesn't, she may seek attention elsewhere, consciously or subconsciously, to fill the gap. This tendency also connects to emotional perception. Women are highly sensitive to subtle cues, tone, body language, and consistency. A man who notices these signals and provides reassurance can maintain attraction and reduce unnecessary tension. Reassurance is not about overextending. It's about strategic, emotional engagement. Providing reassurance selectively, in ways that are meaningful, reinforces your value without compromising your independence. Attention and reassurance also influence long-term attraction. A woman who feels consistently noticed and valued is more likely to respect, trust, and remain emotionally invested in the relationship. When attention is withheld or inconsistent, she becomes more aware of her leverage and may attempt to test boundaries. Men who understand this pattern can navigate interactions with confidence, maintaining both emotional connection and authority in the relationship. Strategically, attention and reassurance create emotional alignment. Women respond positively when they sense that a man is aware, present, and emotionally intelligent. It strengthens their attachment, reduces anxiety, and fosters deeper intimacy. Recognizing this tendency allows a man to communicate value non-verbally and verbally, building respect and attraction simultaneously. Ultimately, attention and reassurance are core female tendencies because they speak directly to emotional security and connection. A man who understands this dynamic can manage his presence thoughtfully, providing enough engagement to maintain emotional investment without losing independence. By recognizing this as a psychological pattern, he gains insight into female behavior, making interactions smoother, attraction stronger, and the relationship more resilient. 3. Social validation. Women are naturally influenced by social validation. This is a psychological tendency where they measure their worth, desirability, and status based on external feedback, attention, and approval. While it's often exaggerated or misinterpreted by men, it's a consistent pattern in female behavior. Social validation isn't about shallow thinking. It's a mechanism for understanding one's position in social and emotional hierarchies. Women notice how others perceive them, how they are treated, and how attention flows around them. This awareness drives many of their decisions, interactions, and emotional responses. Social validation manifests in several ways. Women pay attention to compliments, acknowledgement of achievements, and recognition from people they respect or find desirable. This doesn't necessarily mean they are vain. It reflects an instinctual desire to gauge their social value and emotional influence. When a woman feels validated socially, she experiences a boost in confidence, attractiveness, and engagement. Conversely, a lack of social recognition or being ignored by key individuals, including a man she cares about, can trigger insecurity, overthinking, or attempts to regain attention. This weakness is particularly important in romantic contexts. Women often notice who pays attention to a man, who interacts with him regularly, and who is emotionally or socially influential. Social cues shape their perception of desirability and attachment. A man who understands this can use it to maintain attraction by subtly demonstrating social value, confidence, and composure without overt arrogance. By showing that he is respected, admired, and confident in social contexts, he naturally reinforces her interest and emotional investment. Social validation also drives indirect testing behavior. Women may observe how a man reacts to attention from others or how he interacts in social situations. They assess whether he maintains boundaries, confidence, and authenticity when others validate or challenge him. These observations inform their decisions about how much emotional energy to invest, how to behave, and when to pursue deeper connection. Understanding this pattern helps a man navigate social dynamics without feeling manipulated or reactive. Another aspect is peer influence. Women are highly attuned to the opinions of close friends or their social circle. Praise or acknowledgement from peers can amplify attraction, while criticism or lack of recognition can create doubt or hesitation. A man who understands this can anticipate behavior patterns, recognize triggers, and respond in ways that maintain interest, respect, and attraction. Social validation is not something to exploit maliciously. It is a natural human tendency that provides insight into motivations, desires, and emotional responses. Ultimately, social validation is a consistent female tendency because it connects to self-esteem, emotional perception, and relational awareness. Women use it to navigate social hierarchies, gauge value, and assess emotional alignment. A man who understands this weakness can leverage awareness, subtlety, and confidence to maintain influence, emotional connection, and attraction. Recognizing social validation as a psychological pattern equips him with insight into female behavior, allowing interactions to be more predictable, smooth, and strategically intelligent. 4. Fear of rejection. Fear of rejection is a core female tendency that every man must understand. Women, like men, are naturally sensitive to social and emotional feedback, but their awareness of potential rejection often shapes their behavior more subtly. This fear can influence how they express interest, set boundaries, and engage emotionally. When a woman senses uncertainty or inconsistency in a man's attention, her internal fear of rejection can cause her to hesitate, test boundaries, or overanalyze interactions. Recognizing this tendency gives a man insight into why she may act cautiously or seek reassurance in ways that seem confusing on the surface. Psychologically, fear of rejection is rooted in evolutionary instincts and social conditioning. Women historically relied on stable partnerships and consistent emotional investment for safety and security. Even in modern contexts, this instinct remains, influencing emotional responses and social behavior. When a man shows inconsistency or withdraws attention, a woman's subconscious mind interprets this as a potential threat to her emotional stability. This triggers heightened awareness, cautious behavior, and sometimes indirect attempts to measure a man's interest. This tendency often manifests as testing, subtle engagement, or emotional distancing. She may pull back initially to protect herself, observing your reactions and evaluating your investment before fully opening up again. Her fear of rejection isn't about manipulation. It's about self-preservation. Understanding this allows a man to remain calm and confident while she navigates her emotional responses. By maintaining composure, he reinforces stability and subtly signals that his presence is consistent and non-reactive, which helps reduce her fear over time. Fear of rejection also explains why women sometimes overanalyze messages, actions, or social interactions. She may interpret neutral behavior as disinterest or seek clarification through indirect means. A man who understands this can prevent unnecessary conflict by communicating clearly, providing subtle reassurance, and maintaining a confident, emotionally steady presence. By doing so, he addresses her underlying insecurities without giving excessive attention or appearing needy. Interestingly, this fear often increases attraction when managed correctly. Women are drawn to men who remain calm, composed, and self-assured in the face of emotional uncertainty. By not reacting impulsively to her tests or anxieties, a man demonstrates confidence, leadership, and emotional intelligence, all qualities that naturally elevate his desirability. Her fear of rejection becomes a window into her attachment and desire, rather than a barrier. Ultimately, understanding fear of rejection allows a man to navigate female psychology effectively. He can recognize the signs, respond with awareness, and maintain authority in the interaction without triggering defensiveness or overcompensation. This knowledge is not about exploiting fear, but about using insight to foster attraction, stability, and emotional connection. Recognizing this tendency equips a man with a strategic understanding of behavior, enabling him to lead interactions, maintain interest, and strengthen relational influence. 5. Need for security. Women have a natural need for security, both emotional and practical, and understanding this is crucial for any man who wants to maintain attraction and influence. Security is not only about financial stability, it's also about emotional reliability, consistency, and trust. Women are wired to assess whether a man can provide stability and protection, even subtly, in the relationship. This need drives behavior, influences decision-making, and shapes how she responds to attention, withdrawal, and conflict. A man who recognizes this tendency can position himself as dependable while maintaining independence and confidence. Psychologically, this need stems from the instinct to seek safety in relationships. Emotional security is tied to predictability and consistency. Women want to know that a man's attention, support, and emotional presence are reliable. When they sense inconsistency, withdrawal, or unpredictability, it triggers unease. She may become cautious, test boundaries, or overanalyze actions to evaluate whether the emotional investment is safe and worthwhile. Understanding this allows a man to navigate relationships without overcompensating, while still providing reassurance and maintaining attraction. Security also influences emotional openness. A woman who feels secure is more likely to communicate, share vulnerabilities, and invest emotionally. When security is lacking, she may close off, become distant, or engage in testing behaviors to measure the reliability of the connection. Men who recognize this pattern can respond strategically, offering consistent attention, demonstrating calmness in stressful situations, and avoiding reactive behaviors that undermine stability. These actions reinforce emotional safety without sacrificing independence or control. This need for security also explains why women value consistency in small actions. Repeated behaviors such as showing up when expected, keeping promises, and maintaining respectful communication are interpreted as markers of reliability. Emotional lapses or unpredictable reactions can trigger anxiety, while calm, steady engagement strengthens attraction. By understanding this, a man can navigate dynamics with subtlety, reinforcing his value through reliability rather than forceful attention or overt gestures. Furthermore, security intertwines with trust and attachment. Women assess whether a man's intentions are genuine, whether his emotions are stable, and whether his presence can be counted on during challenges. This assessment often happens unconsciously, yet it significantly shapes emotional response, desire, and connection. Men who comprehend this tendency can provide subtle reassurance without overextending themselves, allowing the woman to feel safe while respecting her autonomy. Ultimately, the need for security is a fundamental female tendency that impacts emotional behavior, attachment, and attraction. By recognizing this, a man gains insight into why a woman may act cautiously, test boundaries, or seek reassurance. When managed with awareness, this knowledge allows him to maintain composure, demonstrate reliability, and strengthen his influence without compromising independence. Security is a core aspect of female psychology, and understanding it equips a man with the tools to foster deeper connection, respect, and attraction. 6. Desire for attention to detail. Women naturally notice details, and this tendency plays a significant role in how they perceive men and relationships. The desire for attention to detail is not about perfectionism, it's about emotional attunement. Women observe subtleties in behavior, communication, and effort, and they often use these cues to assess care, interest, and emotional alignment. A man who fails to notice or address these details may unintentionally signal disinterest or detachment, while one who demonstrates awareness builds respect, trust, and attraction. Psychologically, this tendency arises from a combination of emotional intelligence and social sensitivity. Women process information differently, often picking up on nonverbal cues, tone, and consistency. Small gestures, a remembered preference, a thoughtful question, or acknowledgement of effort carry immense weight because they signal attentiveness and genuine engagement. When a man demonstrates this awareness, it communicates that he values her presence, listens actively, and is invested in the relationship. Attention to detail also impacts emotional satisfaction. Women interpret effort, consistency, and consideration as indicators of value. Forgetfulness, neglect, or superficial interaction can trigger subtle disappointment or decreased emotional investment. Conversely, noticing and acting on details, whether remembering important dates, preferences, or past conversations, enhances emotional connection. It signals reliability, empathy, and attentiveness, all of which increase attraction and deepen engagement. This tendency explains why women may test men in seemingly minor ways. She might mention a preference casually, reference a past conversation, or observe how he reacts to her moods. These are not manipulations. They are assessments of attentiveness. A man who recognizes this can respond with calm observation, thoughtful action, and strategic engagement, reinforcing his value and emotional presence without overreacting or appearing overly eager. attention to detail also affects trust. Women gauge a man's care and consistency through small patterns of behavior. Repeated attentiveness signals reliability and respect, while neglect signals indifference or emotional unavailability. Recognizing and responding to these patterns strengthens trust, enhances attraction, and minimizes emotional friction in interactions. Furthermore, women value men who actively engage in understanding their perspective. Asking thoughtful questions, recalling preferences, or acting on subtle cues demonstrates awareness and emotional intelligence. These behaviors communicate that the man is not only present physically, but also mentally and emotionally, which significantly impacts connection and influence. Ultimately, the desire for attention to detail is a consistent female tendency that shapes emotional perception, trust, and attraction. A man who understands this can navigate relationships with awareness, recognizing which gestures and attentions carry weight. By observing, remembering, and responding thoughtfully, he reinforces his value, enhances connection, and maintains influence without overexerting himself. Attention to detail is not just a preference, it is a psychological trigger that strengthens emotional bonds and elevates attraction. 7. Desire for emotional security. The final female tendency every man must know is the desire for emotional security. This is different from general security. It focuses specifically on stability, trust, and reassurance within the emotional dynamic of a relationship. Women naturally seek partners who provide consistency, reliability, and emotional safety. When these elements are present, she feels confident, valued, and willing to invest deeply. When absent, she may experience anxiety, overanalyze behavior, or test boundaries to measure the stability of the connection. Understanding this tendency allows a man to navigate relationships effectively while maintaining influence and attraction. Psychologically, emotional security is rooted in attachment patterns and instinctive responses. Women are wired to assess whether a man's attention, care, and intentions are dependable. They subconsciously monitor his behavior, tone, consistency, and presence to determine if the emotional environment is safe. Emotional security is not about control, it's about trust. A woman who feels emotionally secure can relax, communicate openly, and invest fully in a connection, creating deeper intimacy and attachment. This tendency often explains behaviors such as seeking reassurance, observing reactions, or testing limits. She may ask questions, make subtle comments, or indirectly gauge your emotional availability. These actions are not signs of manipulation, but natural responses to the need for emotional stability. A man who recognizes this pattern can respond with calmness, consistency, and thoughtful engagement, demonstrating that he is reliable and emotionally present without becoming reactive or overbearing. Emotional security is also closely tied to attraction. Women are drawn to men who are consistent, composed, and able to manage their own emotions. A man who can remain steady during uncertainty or tension signals reliability and leadership, which heightens desirability. Conversely, inconsistent behavior, erratic attention, or emotional unpredictability can trigger doubt and decrease emotional investment. Understanding this tendency allows a man to maintain influence, communicate value, and enhance attraction simply through composure and presence. Providing emotional security doesn't require constant attention or validation. It's about demonstrating stability, maintaining calm confidence, and showing that your involvement is genuine and dependable. Small actions, consistency in behavior, and thoughtful responses reinforce this sense of safety, making her feel valued and willing to invest further. Emotional security strengthens trust, reduces anxiety, and encourages her to reciprocate investment naturally. Ultimately, The desire for emotional security is a core female tendency that shapes attachment, investment, and emotional behavior. Men who understand this can navigate relationships with awareness, providing stability, consistency, and reassurance without losing independence. Recognizing this pattern allows a man to maintain influence, deepen connection, and foster attraction effectively. Emotional security is not just a preference, it is a psychological foundation that governs behavior, attachment, and desire, and mastering awareness of it equips a man with the tools to lead relationships confidently. Understanding female weaknesses is not about manipulation. It's about awareness, insight, and effective communication. Each tendency we've explored, from the need for emotional validation and attention to detail, to fear of rejection, social validation, and desire for security, reveals how women process relationships, emotions, and attachment. Recognizing these patterns allows a man to navigate interactions with confidence, maintain composure, and foster genuine connection. Women respond strongly to men who can balance awareness with independence. They notice consistency, attentiveness, emotional stability, and subtle engagement. By understanding these tendencies, a man can provide reassurance without overextending, show care without becoming desperate, and demonstrate value without arrogance. Awareness of these psychological patterns equips him to predict behavior, respond strategically, and strengthen attraction naturally. Each weakness highlights an opportunity for influence and connection. Women crave recognition, emotional safety, and attentiveness, and they respond positively when these needs are met in a balanced, composed way. Men who understand this can avoid unnecessary conflict, reduce misunderstandings, and communicate value effectively. Recognizing these tendencies is not about exploiting weaknesses. It's about fostering understanding, respect, and meaningful engagement. Ultimately, the top 7 female tendencies serve as a roadmap for men who want to navigate relationships intelligently. By acknowledging emotional patterns, social sensitivities, and attachment needs, a man gains insight into behavior, strengthens influence, and maintains attraction. Knowledge of these weaknesses empowers him to communicate effectively, lead interactions confidently, and create deeper, more fulfilling connections. Awareness is the key, and understanding these patterns is the foundation for success in dating, relationships, and emotional connection.